Geraldton, Western Australia.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for doing this interview for the 39th Battalion. If we can start, can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved in the 39th at the very beginning?
It's quite funny, really. We were camped down at Mount Martha with the 58th Battalion, and we had a colonel, Lieutenant Colonel named Hale, who was a little Jewish type chappie. He was as round as he was high. And this was on the first intake of what they called universal troops, or conscripts if you wanted. They didn't like them called conscripts, they called them universal trainees. So Wally Purchase and I were both sergeants. We were given 20 men, picked out by the Lieutenant Colonel out of these trainees to do an officer's course. Now the Colonel went along, these chaps were all lined up, and he went along with Wally and I, and he asked them their names. And one chappie named Roy Fairburn, whom I went to school with, and the Fairburns at that time were pretty high up in politics. They owned most of Western Victoria, and they were pretty classy people. And of course Roy was even going to school, Roy was wet, to say the best of him, and he was a dodo. And the Colonel said to him, "What's your name, young fella?" He said, "Roy Fairburn." He said, "You any relation to the Fairburns over in Western Victoria?" He said, "Yes." He said, "That's my uncle." "Oh," he said, "You'll do, you'll make a good officer, step out." So this went along right along the line until we had about 20 or 30 potential officers. And the Colonel turned around to Wally and I, said, "Right," he said, "now I want you to train these troops to become officer material." So Wally and I set to, and we had to set the whole course for a fortnight. Then at the end of the course we set the examination, written and oral. So at the end of the course, Wally and I said to the Colonel, "May we go in this and go to Duntroon?" And he said, "Yes, by all means." So Wally and I thought, "Oh, this is good, we're going to go through this exam." He said, "We've set the exam and we know all the blooming answers and everything." The day went on, and a couple of days later we got the results of this exam. Wally and I failed.
And you'd set the exam?
We set the exam and asked all the questions and everything, and we were the two that failed out of all of them, mind you. And it wasn't long after that we shifted up to Nagambie Road. No, wait on, I'll get this right in a minute. Up to Trawl. And then not long after that again, they called for volunteers from the 39th Battalion.
For the 39th?
For the 39th Battalion, yes. And all officers and senior NCOs were volunteers. Now this routine order went around to all battalions. And of course it was an ideal opportunity. These battalion commanders were going to get rid of the rubbish out of every battalion. It was a golden opportunity, which they did. And they said, you'll go to the 39th Battalion. And they were virtually, most of them were UT trainers anyway, trainees, and we all ended up in the 39th Battalion, and we had some. But when I arrived at Darley, went out to Bacchus Marsh, Phil Gardner was taking the names of all the chappies as we came through. Wally Purchase went through before me, and he was made platoon sergeant of the mortars. And a couple of chaps in front of me, no names, no packrel. Phil Gardner said, "What's your occupation?" And this chappie said, "I'm a gangster." And Phil looked at me and said, "Oh, yeah." He said, what's your occupation?" He said, "No," he said, "I'm a gangster." And Phil said, "Come on." He said, "Fair income." And he said, "No," he said, "I'm a gangster." So Phil wrote down gangster. Next coming fella comes along and he said, "What's your name?" He said, Jimmy anyway. He said, "I'm this chappie's lieutenant. I'm his offsider." So Phil just wrote that down, and that's the way the 39th were. There's 4 men in the 39th Battalion with 1 arm each.
Yeah.
One was the bugler, and one I think he might have been the cobbler. I'm not too sure. Matt Binns. And I can't think of the bugler's name. But we had another chap who had polio, whom you know who I'm referring to. One of our company sergeant majors in the rifle company was night blind. So when he went out on patrol of a night time, he hung onto the bayonet of the fella in front of him. And that's how he got through. Well, we were the greatest ragtag army that you
Dad's
ever
army.
heard of. It was like Dad's army in England, only it was worse. But, well, we didn't know what we were doing. Nobody seemed to know what we were doing. And things went from A to B and ended up, oh, that's right, Phil said to me, he said, what's your rank? And I said, oh, platoon sergeant, number 3 platoon. He said, right, I go over and take over from Purchase, which I did, and of course Wally didn't speak to me for weeks after that. Anyway, when we came to go up to Sydney to get on the Aquitania, Matt Binns was in front of it. Kevin Fisk was there, and Matt Binns and quite a few of the others. And now Matt dragged his greatcoat over his right shoulder, and then he put his equipment over, just hung his equipment over that. Now when we got up to the top of the gangplank, there was a doctor there checking us all to see that we're physically fit. And when our turn came, or Matt's turn came, we all started to push. And we virtually pushed Matt through. And that's how Matt got on. How the bugler got on, I don't know. But that's how Matt Binns got on the Aquitania to come up here. Nobody knew anybody. There was a few from the 58 Battalion. There was some from the 29th Battalion and other battalions all over Victoria. But apart from one or two, nobody knew anybody. But we blended in. I don't know whether it's because we're such a ragtag battalion or what it is, but this camaraderie was absolutely marvellous, and it was there, as you say, it was there right from
Right at the beginning, and over 60 years later, it's still there.
It's still there, yep.
Yeah.
It came out of Darley, was we did an exercise up the Lerder Gorge there one day, and it was a very steep, I think you've seen it, very
I've
steep
seen the
gorge.
Lerder, yeah.
And Phil Gardner, in his wisdom, we were down the bottom, and he and his batman were up the top of the gorge. And to give us some experience about being frightened and being under pressure, he was rolling rocks down the mountainside to us. And we saw these. We didn't know this was going to happen. We saw these rocks coming. So we dived under this dead tree. And one of the chaps dropped his rifle, and of course a rock landed on the rifle and it was U-shape. It made a hell of a mess of his rifle. But we had an armourer sergeant called Jack Hand. He fixed that. Jack was the only chap in the army that could make 303 fire around a corner. Yes, anyway, it came to, we got very friendly with some cafe owners that had a cafe up near the football ground in Bacchus Marsh. And they put on a send-off party for us this particular night. It was Christmas night. We were going away the following day.
Right, yes.
Boxing Day. And we had a few beers in there. We had quite a few beers in there, as a matter of fact. And one stage, we was about 6 of us in the middle of the road, Kevin Fisk, Wally Purchase, Alan Swift, and a few others, trying to roll up the white lines on the Cinnamon Road for bandages for the Red Cross. All of us sitting in the middle of the road, mind you, trying to roll these lines up. So we got back to camp that night, and Wally Purchase was walking ahead of us, and all of a sudden Wally disappeared, and we couldn't understand where he'd gone to. But this Bacchus Darley Camp was on top of a plateau, and around the plateau were irrigation channels. Wally had walked into one of these irrigation channels and just disappeared under the wall, so we had to drag him out. But the next day on parade there was a chap named Darky Wilkinson, and Darky, I had a hangover, we all had hangovers, and Darky was still 3 parts full. So he comes out with his equipment dragging on the ground, and falls in, and I said, come on Darky, get on your feet. No. Darky, get on your feet. No. I said, Darky, get on your bloody feet. He said, no. He said, I'll have you down behind the cookhouse. I said, right, that'll do me. So away we went down behind the cookhouse, the two of them about 20 other fellas there had to come and see this. And behind the cookhouse there was quite a steep little creek, ravine if you like to call it, and that's where Darky and I had our fight. And each one was trying to get up the hill above the other one so he can go down like this. But anyway, it lasted about 20 minutes and got back on parade and I said, "Righto, Darky, get in line, stand up." He said, "Yep." So he did. Everything was right. But years after the war, Darky came down to a reunion at the Bowls Club at Carlton there, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, yes.
And he came up to me and he said, "Hey," he said, "you bugger gave me a black eye." I said, "When?" He said, "Remember that fight we had?" I said,
He hadn't forgotten.
Yeah, I'd forgotten all about it. We were the best of mates after that. We always bought one another. The first thing we did was buy one another a whiskey on an Anzac Day or on a reunion.
Nice.
But, anyway, we got onto the Aqua. I got in up the Aqua. There was quite a bit of discussion. Some chaps like myself said we went up the back road, the back railway line, and joined the main Sydney line at Broadmeadows. And another party said, "No, we didn't. We went through Melbourne." I said, "Rubbish, we didn't go anywhere near Melbourne." "Yes, we did. We went from the Shielders on the station." It turned out there were two train loads.
Oh, you're both right.
Both right. One went the back way and one went through Melbourne. I've always been crook on the buggers for that because I was on the wrong train.
Oh, you can get to wave.
Yeah. But when we did get to Sydney, there was some PO down onto the wharf and we were boarding the Aquitania. And I only found this out recently too. That there were some POWs coming off further up the ship, down the gangplank. And you could see that they were sailors.
Yes.
And I found out, about 2 years ago, that the Aquitania coming down this coast picked up survivors from the cormorant that sunk the HMT Sydney. And they were letting them off in Sydney when we, the 39th Battalion, were going on board. Now that's incredible, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? When you were going on board, though, did you know where you were going?
I can't answer that. I'm not too sure. We knew we were going up to New Guinea.
Oh, so you did know it was New Guinea that you were going to?
Yeah, we knew we were going up there, and we had been told that we were going up there on garrison and to take your golf clubs and your tennis rackets, cricket gear, whatever, and you'd be on garrison up there. So we took them. And going up there was one little fella. He should never have been in the army, let alone the 39th. He never had a hair in his head, he never had a tooth in his mouth. But he had a violin. It was a broomstick stuck through a 4-gallon tin. And he had some strings on that and a violin bow. And he used to play it like a violin, and he was standing on the ground and play it like a violin. He kept us entertained nearly all the way up to New Guinea on the Aquitania. But when we got up there, we wondered what the hell we'd struck. Come in from Victoria, we'd never seen most of us had never seen a black man in our life.
Yes.
We were all Melbourne people.
So this would have been your first trip overseas, wouldn't it?
It was my first trip out of Victoria.
Oh, right. Yes.
I'd never been on a boat before, probably an electric train, but that was about it. Oh, I used to go down to Queenscliff for the holidays, yes, on the Taruna. And when we started out to go out to the 7 Mile Drome, it was stinking hot. And of course the natives were all walking along with us and they're all scabby and scaly. And of course, "Oh, keep away from us, we don't want to catch your disease." But then we're getting out around about this 3 Mile Hill there somewhere, and I see something sail through the air. That looked like a golf club. Go on a bit further, tennis racket sails through the air. Because by this time our feet are dragging and it's stinking hot.
And you're walking to the 7 Mile Drive.
Yeah, we'd never seen this heat before. From Victoria straight up to the tropics in 7 days flat, or roughly.
Yeah.
And these golf clubs kept disappearing into the scrub, and all of a sudden I see this fiddle go. This violin goes up through the air and into the scrub.
Oh.
So that was the end of that.
That was the end of your music.
Yeah, that was the end of our music. But on the Aquitania, I got nailed. I was about 20 of us got nailed one day for spud barbers. Well, peel potatoes.
Oh, spud barbers,
yeah.
Yes.
And we were down on about G or H deck, well down below the water line. And there was no air conditioning those days, only a funnel that allowed the air to come in. And we're down there, and of course it would have been all right. We had to fill these tin, looked like rubbish tins, about that round and about that high. We had to fill 30 of them by lunchtime. And these bags and bags of potatoes are there, and we tipped them out, tipped them into the potato peeling machine and turned it on. We got about...
You actually had a machine to do it?
Yes, peel the spuds.
All right.
And we had about 3 or 4 of these big rubbish tin things full of peeled spuds when the machine broke down. I went and told the head cook or the chef or whatever he was. He came out, had a look, and said, yeah, he said, that's no good. He said, you'll have to do them by hand. This was about 9 o'clock. And I've got to cook them and everything for the officers' dinner. So that's the way we start. Somebody got seasick and away they went. Somebody else got seasick and away they went. It ended up with about 5 of us there. So I said, this is no good. So we got these bags of spuds, we tipped them out on the deck, steel deck, got the fire hose. Oh, in the meantime, the cook had come out to see us. How you going? Oh, we're getting now. He said, you Australians are always up to some mischief, aren't you? He said, just don't try and put anything over me.
What nationality was he?
Tommy.
All right.
And we tipped all these spuds on the deck. We got the fire hose and we hosed them down, gave them a hell of a good hosing down, because every second one was rotten, and oh my God.
Oh, the smell.
Yeah. We filled the other tins with these unpeeled potatoes to about that far off the top, and then put these peeled spuds on top of that. I went and told the cook, and he came out and said, oh yeah, he said, you boys, you must have been an idiot. To think that we did that in about half an hour. And he said, oh, you boys have done a good job. He said, right, away you go. So away we went. We got out of there quickly. It was that afternoon, someone yelled out, look out, Kev, here comes the cook. And I turned around and I see this cook stand there with a meat cleaver in his hand. So I took off. I didn't wait for any questions or anything. I took off. And I found a little hiding spot and I dropped into it. So that went on for the next 4 or 5 days. When I'd be walking up the deck, soaking up the sun, oh, it was absolutely beautiful on the luxury liner. And someone would yell out, look out, Kev, here comes the cook. I didn't bother to turn around, I just took off. I don't know whether he was there or not.
And did he ever catch you?
No.
No,
never caught me. And I think he got sick of it after a couple of days, and I got sick of it. And
did they fix the machine?
I don't know. I wouldn't have a clue.
You didn't have any more potato peeling?
No, they wouldn't have us back in the cookhouse at all.
The clothing that you were issued, you're walking out to 7 Mile Drome and you're as hot as can be and throwing away your equipment, your leisure equipment. What clothing were you wearing at that stage?
I think we have long khaki shorts on and a little pair of felt gaiters that did up with 2 press studs.
Oh, yes.
They weren't the webbing gaiters, they were felt or something to that effect. Just the ordinary shirt. And that was it. But the boats had been loaded on the way up. We had a heck of a convoy, one of the biggest naval convoys that ever left Australia at the time. But you heard all that. And my cousin was serving on the HMAS Australia at the time. I didn't know he wasn't a cousin at the time. He married my cousin later on. And he took some good photos of the Aquitania, which I sent down there too, by the way. You better try and find them.
We'll trace those, we'll find those.
And we never saw the Aussie once we got out of Sydney Heads, out of the Heads. She was just over the horizon all the time. But the other shift, one of the freighters, had been loaded back to front. I don't know if you've heard this before, but all our cooking utensils and tents and all that sort of thing was on the bottom. Then on top of that was all the ammunition and the anti-aircraft, and everything was loaded back to front, because when we got out to the 7 Mile Drome, we never had anything. The 49th Battalion was there. Their Lieutenant Colonel was a chap named Bill McKell. You know him?
No.
It's very, very nice chap. But anyway, the 49th Battalion gave us half their rations for 2 or 3 days so that we wouldn't starve. But we were put on a rocky outcrop of a hill just on the edge of the 7 Mile Drome and said, that's your camp, that's where you sleep. And the rest of the battalion was scattered all around the drome, and some went down to Bootless Bay, and they were scattered all over the place, but we never had anything. The first night I had a blanket, which we had in the on the Aquitania, and I tied each end of it to a sapling, and I used that as a hammock for the first couple of nights, and I slept in that. But on the Aquitania, I don't know how it happened, but the sergeants got the upper deck, A deck or boat deck, whatever you like to call it, and we were 4 to a cabin, and we had 2 toilets, 2 showers, 3 hand basins. Oh, we were really set up.
That's your cruise.
Yeah, and we'd go out to boat drill every morning. The first thing was boat drill, and you'd go out there, and you'd come back and all your beds were made and your equipment was laid out, your boots were polished. The officers and nurses were down on B deck, and they had to go to the end of the gangway, or what do you call it? Gangway, to go to the toilet or to get the showers. How they ever worked that out, I don't know, but we travelled in absolute luxury. In the army, after you have a leave, final leave or week or fortnight leave, you've always got to have a short arm inspection. Now, I don't know if you know what that is.
No, tell me what.
No.
Tell the camera.
Well, the short arm inspection is where the doctor inspects your penis to see that you haven't got a venereal disease.
Oh, right.
Now, we were lined up on the Aquitania, and all we had on was a pair of boots, nothing else. And the doctor's sitting there on B deck, and he's sitting in a chair right in front of his cabin door. And as you go past, he's got a pencil and he's lifting up your penis and having a look at it to see if you haven't got a venereal disease. And the chappie and me said, God, Doc, he said, that's a funny thing. Doc looked up and he said, what's wrong with you? And he said, well, he said, I've had my dick in some funny places, Doc. He said, but that's the first time I've ever seen it on a bloody perch. The 7 Mile Drome. After about a week, I think it was, we got our tents and made some wooden beds and made ourselves a bit more comfortable. And of course we dug slit trenches all over Moresby. We dug them on the 3 Mile Murray Barracks Hill there, the top of the 3 Mile Hill, and that's enough.
How many people roughly would it have been out at the 7 Mile when you were there with the 39th?
I would say most of the battalion, I think B Company was down at Bootless, and I had 2 detachments of mortars down at Bootless. Otherwise, there was 4 detachments. I think the WE War establishment at that time was 6 detachments of mortars per number 3 platoon. It varied. Sometimes you were 6, sometimes you were 8. And they kept changing the WE War establishment. Why, I don't know, but they did. So we had 2 down at Bootless Bay, and I had 4 on the aerodrome. 1 on Akak Hill, or halfway up Akak Hill, and the other one was down on the southern end, on the southern side, yes, of the drome.
So there are quite a lot of people with
yes,
no
most of the
equipment.
battalion was there. The Akak was scattered all around the drome, of course, and it was who was there? Bertie Oliver. Yeah, Bertie Oliver was platoon commander of the Akak platoon. But the Japanese started bombing us, and they used to come in at lunchtime every day, and you'd see these V's of Japanese. There might be 10, 15, 20 planes, there might be 80 or 200, but they'd come in at lunchtime, and we'd just get our lunch going. We used to cook our own meals there, and just get your lunch going. These Japs would come in, and you'd have to get in the slit trench to eat your meal or take your cup of tea in. And every time it happened, you got your cup of tea or your meal covered in dirt. So we started altering our meal times. And one day we had our lunch at 11 o'clock, and the Japs still came over and bombed us. Now, whether they had a good fifth column there or not, I don't know. But we couldn't trick.
Talked about the Japanese coming. How did you personally feel when you first came under attack?
The first air raid, I wanted it up and run. I was in a slit trench, but that wasn't good enough. I wanted to outrun the bombs. But what training we'd had, and I wasn't the only one, the other boys, none of the boys ran, they all stayed in the slit trenches. But it was just through sheer determination. But your instinct is to run, and you can't outrun a bomb. You just can't do it.
Over time, did that change?
Yes, it became just an everyday event. But we've had bombs. Now, slit trench is about 2 foot 6 wide, about 4 foot 6, 5 foot deep. And we had started off with just the one trench. But then when the Zeros came in, the Jap bombers used to come from straight ahead of us, and the Zeros used to come from the right. So we had to add another arm on the slit trench. If it was the Zeros, we got round the corner. But there was nothing. I think it was 200 raids we saw in Moresby. And I think I could be corrected on that. But it was roundabout anyway. And they used to, daytime, nighttime, they'd come over and they'd just fly around and around and around, pick out their targets, drop their bombs, fly around and around and around again, taking photos, because we never had any Air Force. When we got there, we had some Wirraways, but they lasted about 3 days. They were shot down without any trouble, and we were left without anything. But during one of the raids, the first raid we had, we went down to the aerodrome to fill in the bomb holes, and there was a chap coming up from the aerodrome, and he said to me, he said, "You want an aeroplane?" He said, "That's my aeroplane over there." He said, "You can have it." He says, "It won't hold enough petrol to get me to Australia." All the civvies just went like that, just disappeared overnight. And he said, "You can have it." And I said, "Oh, good." So I owned an aeroplane for 24 hours. The Jap shot it up the next day.
What sort of jobs were you doing in New Guinea, or PNG, when you first got there?
When we first got there, just unloading ships, digging slit trenches, and that was about the strength of it. Later on, when they got the ships unloaded, we did get some red gun carriers, and we did do a little bit of patrolling. But as far as training is concerned, nothing. Absolutely nothing. We were the greatest ragtag army of all time. Some of them were getting around in grass skirts, some in, just a pair of shorts and nothing else. And as I said before, we were a ragtag.
But you'd had a uniform issued at this stage, hadn't you?
Oh yes, we had uniforms.
But you just didn't wear it?
There was no discipline whatsoever.
Oh.
None. Our CO, what was his name? Honour. Colonel Honour. Colonel Honour?
He was later.
No, he was
later.
He was later. He was a hell of a good fellow.
Yes.
He came from down here, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
Down Three Springs. You'll see that on the way home tomorrow. I can't think of his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he was a very sick man. He was a World War I chappie, and he spent most of his time in hospital. He was boarded out, and I think it was Major Anderson, I think it was, took over commanding officer. And then Bill Owens came up. But Bill and my mother, and Bill was in the bank at Leongatha, State Savings Bank. And he was in the army there in the 29th Battalion as a senior, and I was in the 29th Battalion as a cadet. I joined the army on the 10th of February 1937, on my 15th birthday. And that's in the Chocos.
Yes.
I think mainly the commanding officer up there at the time was a chap named Biscombe, John Biscombe. And he was also friendly with my mother and father. And I think I might have been getting a little bit out of control, coming a bit of a lout. And he got me in the army, and things sort of worked out from there on.
He brought you into line.
Yeah.
What was the good times in the early stages of being in New Guinea, around Port Moresby?
Apart from the grog or the lack of it, nothing. There was nothing to do there except wait for the Japs to come over. Then you got in the slit trench, and when they went home, you got out of the slit trench.
You're telling us before about rolling a keg of beer, or a barrel of beer.
Oh, yes, when the Japs first bombed Port Moresby, the civilian population of Port Moresby just walked straight out of Moresby, out of their houses, out of their businesses. Every house was left open. Every pub was left open. The post office had been hit, and there were thousands of big sheets of stamps, Papua New Guinea stamps, laying all over the ground. I didn't even pick one up, just left them there. They probably got wet when it rained or blown away or something. But everybody raided the pubs. One chappie I know, no names, no factual again, sent home a house full of furniture. How he got it out of there, I do not know. I don't want to. It was enough to set him up after the war when he got married. And he's still alive today too.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And they just walked out and left everything open. And the Ak up on top of the Ak hill where we were halfway up. The Vickers machine guns were just covering the bottom part of it, just over the drome. We were halfway up the hill, and the Ak were right on the top of the hill, 3 inches. They were only fired about 14 or 15,000 feet or something. The Japs used to come in just above that, because nothing worried them. We never had any aeroplanes. And we were getting Kitty Hawks. Kitty Hawks are coming tomorrow. Tomorrow. So they became Tomorrow Hawks, and then they didn't come, so they became Never Hawks. And when they did come,
you shot them?
We shot them down. Except for Wackett. He took off again, about 15, 20 minutes later on. And there was a single Jap recce came in, which had been coming over nearly every day. He just came in and flew around as though there was nothing there. We had one aeroplane, he shut him down. He landed in Bootless Bay. And Jim Waters will tell you a story about that. They had a fight who was going to pick him up out of the water on top of the hill. They had their own transport, so they could go into Moresby and load up their trucks with grog out of the pubs. But we went in one night, there was 2 or 3 or 4 of us went in, and we pinched a barrel of beer. Now, in those days, they were wooden barrels made by a cooper. And we started to roll that out to the 7 Mile drome. We got about 3 mile out when the rungs on it start to become loose. So we decided to drink it on the side of the road.
How many of you were there?
4 or 5 or 6 of us.
Yeah.
And we stood it up on end and knocked the plug in. And the beer shot up in the air. I reckon it went 20 feet in the air if it went a foot, which left us about half it was a 9-gallon keg, left us about half that to drink. But the transport going past, we couldn't get a transport to put the 9-gallon keg on. I know they let us roll it. But as soon as we opened it, the buggers stopped.
Everybody came.
They all wanted to drink.
And you were telling us before about the American Army asked you to guard the
supply dump. Yeah. The Americans were bringing in a lot of supplies, and they had good tucker. Although they didn't think so, but they did. They had good tucker. And they had this dump on the football ground at Eli Beach. That's right, Eli Beach. And it must have been 20 or 30 boxes high. It was stacked right up, and they put us on guard. And I was there, more platoon were there one night, and someone had already started it, but we were knocking off this food. They had a thing called spam or wham, I forget what it was, but it was in a 7-pound tin. And it was absolutely beautiful. It was pork, and it was a bit on the salty side, which suited us beautifully up there. And we were knocking this off and digging these tunnels right through this heap of supplies. There was tunnels all over it, all through it. And we found there at one stage some hard-boiled lollies. They were in a wooden bucket, something like you'd find them in Japan or somewhere like that, with a bit of cane and that wrapped around the top of it. But anyway, we found them. And nearly every tent in the 39th Battalion had one of them hanging up outside the tent. Oh, they were beautiful.
Never found out?
the Yanks, they didn't care. If they found out, they wouldn't worry about it.
Oh.
They'd give you the world. Honestly, that we were camped near an American boom camp. They weren't infantry, they were a supply work battalion. And they were screams, really. They had hot and cold running water. Now, if we wanted a shower, we had to walk to the water point, which is right down the end of the drome. I suppose by the time you got down there and got your two bucketfuls of cold water and walked back again, you'd do about, I reckon, 1.5 to 2 miles. And when you got back, you had an old kerosene tin, with nail holes in the bottom of it, and a rope up over a branch of a tree. And you'd tip a bucket of water in there, your mate would pull it up, and you'd hop under it and soap up as quick as you could. And by then, of course, the water's run out. So you use your second bucket to rinse yourself down. But this work battalion, they had everything. And they were a scream, really. They were funny. And we used to go over there and shower with them. They had hot and cold running water. That was terrific. We didn't mind. They didn't mind. And whatever we wanted, they might have some tucker there. We'd just take that, go home. They didn't mind. But the funny thing about it was the air raid warning was 3 shots out of a .303 rifle. And the all clear was 1 shot. Now these bungs, for the want of a better name, I'm not being rude or anything, had an old truck. Never had any wheels on, just the hubs. Never had any back on it, any tray, just the frame. Now they had that sitting up on a slope with a wire rope on the back of it and a chock under the wheel. Now we used to get the air raid warning, possibly 20 minutes before the Japs came, over half an hour. It was Ted Costick and some of the other boys from the 39th Battalion. They were sitting in the jungle on the end of the aerodrome at, I think it was at Popandetta. And they used to give us a warning that the Japs were coming.
They'd ring through.
Yes,
on the telephone. Oh, yeah.
And they'd give us the signal that the Japs were coming. So 3 shots would be fired. And these Americans would rush out, they'd jump onto this old truck, and someone would knock the chock out, and down the hill it'd go. Flat out, and they'd go down into the creek bed and smack up against the other side of the creek, and bods would go everywhere. And that's where they'd stay, even after the all clear, which was 1 shot. They may stay there for an hour. They wouldn't come out for about an hour later.
And then they'd have to walk up the hill again.
They'd have to walk up the hill and winch the blooming truck back up again for the next time. We found out then that if you fired 3 shots, every American disappeared, white and black. And they had some beautiful films going on up there, only it was a small screen. I think he called it a 16mm, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, it
was a small screen.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't knock off until 6 o'clock. But by the time you got down to where this picture theatre was, they had several of them, but this was one I'm talking about. The Americans would be there, and there'd be thousands of them sitting down, waiting for it to come dark so that the movie had come on. And we were at the back of it. By the time we got there, we were, from here down to the road away from the screen. And
couldn't see the screen.
And we could hear it all right, but you couldn't see it. So somebody got the bright idea of firing 3 shots. Bang, 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 and the place is empty. We just walked in, took the best seats and waited for the Yanks to come back. They never ever said anything. They were really good-hearted people. They'd give you anything, but if we wanted a bed, we'd go over to their camp, fire 3 shots, walk into their tent or hut or whatever and take the bed and go home. I mean, this is fair dinkum, I'm not kidding you.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, just before we came home on leave, a chap named Gale, lieutenant of the transport. Gale, Bill sounds right, I don't know whether it's Bill or not. Anyway, Gale was his name. And he said to the transport boys one day, he said, our water truck's just about had it. We didn't know we were coming home on leave at the time. And he said, go out and see if you can get another one. We had 6 water trucks that night. I'll tell you, it was daylight robbery, but the Yanks didn't care. There was nothing, never ever anything
Well,
said
your
about
main job with the 39th was with the mortar platoon.
the Morty as platoon sergeant, number 3
All right.
platoon.
Tell us about that, what that involved and some of the
Well,
experiences
it didn't
there.
involve much really. Once we got the troops out onto their different positions, there was not a great deal to do, except, as I say, dodge the bombs. We were issued with Bren gun carriers at one stage. The transport were issued with them, and we were issued with the Bren gun carriers, one per detachment. Now at that stage, I think we had 6 detachments per platoon, per mortar platoon. The platoon commander, who was Bevan John French at the time, he had one. Ron Dow had a motorbike. He was the Don R. And I had a motorbike. But anyway, this particular day we went out took 4 or 5 carriers, and we went out on a patrol. Just more or less having a look at the country to see what was there. And coming home, we came across this minefield, which had the star pickets all around it. It was one strand of barbed wire around the top of the pickets. And in the middle of it, there was a track through it where you could drive the carriers. So we're going up this track this particular day, about 5 o'clock at night. We want to get home and have a shower or something to eat. We've been out all day. And I'm in the leading carrier. I think it was Ernie Breadmore driving. When it threw the left track, we're doing about 40, 50 k's an hour. And of course, when the track came off, the bogey dropped down on the ground, and the carrier went bang, swung right around and went through this fence into about 20 yards into the minefield. We sat there. I don't think we even breathed. We sat there. I had a quick look over the side, and there's a big mine about that big laying right up against the bogey, directly underneath me. The driver had a look over his side, and there's a couple more there. And boys had a look over the back, and there's a couple more mines there. They're all round us. We're sitting there, what the hell do we do now? I told this story for the book, by the way, and never ever got printed. Somebody else took it, and I objected. But we were sitting there, and there was a mob of wallabies. They do have them up there. Went across this minefield. There must have been 15 or 20 of them. Bang, bang, bang across the minefield. Not one of the mines went off. So we very gingerly got out, and I cleared a bit of a path back to the road, the track, and got the boys out, and hooked a wire rope onto the tractor and pulled her out and put the track on, and away we went. Anyway, when I got back to headquarters, I made a written report about it, and it turned out the engineers came out. Every mine was wet. Every mine was a dud. But we could have been blown apart.
Oh, yes.
And the other experience was with 2nd Battalion. We're coming down, we landed at a place called Efogi. We're coming down the coast, a reserve battalion, and we'd been plodding along in sand about that deep all day, and we were tired and we were dirty. And we stopped this particular night about 5 o'clock. Another chap and I rip off our clothes straight off in the nutty, ran down the beach, I suppose to be 10 or 15 yards wide, and dived into the water, and we were there for about 15 or 20 minutes, stark as swimming. He got out and walked back up to the track and stood on a mine. And that was the end of him. Now I'm still in the water and I'm in the nude. So there's only one way for me to get back. And the sun's behind me. We're up on the north coast. And I'm crawling up the beach, and I'm very carefully pushing the sand aside so that I won't find any more work on any more mines. And the boys are up on the road and they're giving me buggery. Hey Sarge, look at you, get your ass sunburnt. Hey Sarge, keep the old fella out of the dirt, you get go for rush. They gave me absolute hell. And of course, you can't help laughing in a situation like that. I don't know why, but you've always got to laugh. And it's ridiculous. But anyway, I got up there and everything was okay. But the next one was I was put on a standing patrol out at a place called Yarrabos. So it's about down there, Weewak. And it's a native garden, or was a native garden. And the artillery had this native village, which had about 700 or 800 Japs in it. already ranged on. And I was sent out there with about 12 or 15 chappies as protection for this artillery officer, OPIP. And every day we had our barbed wire out in front, our tripwires and all that sort of thing. And every day we used to go through and go for a walk down to the village where these Japs were. Sneak up and have a look at them over a bit of a hill. And, oh yeah, they're still there. Be quite happy and content. Anyway, this particular day, now this is the part you're not going to believe. This particular day we're going down there, and I'm out in the lead, and it had been raining. There was a bit of mud on the track. It's only about that wide. Now, Yarrabos Garden was in the form of an egg timer. It was 2 barrels of the egg timer. And the first one was small, and then you went through this jungle, and then you came out onto a very large native garden. But there was nothing there. It was as bare as this table. Nothing. And I'm pushing along on this track, and there's a piece of board. Those days you used to get your kerosene or your oil or whatever in 4-gallon tins, and the 2 4-gallon tins fitted into one of these boxes. We used to call them deal boxes. They were very handy for lighting a fire. But anyway, this piece of deal would be about 18 inches, 2 foot long. It was right in this muddy patch. And I was just going to look, I fair dinkum, I had my foot just over it like that, ready to put my foot down. And a native popped up in front of me, and he said, "Tabata, bomb belongum, Jap belongum ground." And he pointed. And I got one of the boys' bayonets and I lifted up this piece of deal, and there was a nice big mine under it. I gave him some tobacco, only had a bit of dry greys ready rubbed it was, and I gave him what I had, and I turned round to the boys and I said, "Hey, anybody got any tobacco I can give this bong?" And they said, "No." And I turned round and he wasn't there. He'd gone. I turned around and I said, "Where did that bloke go?" They said, "What bloke?" Now, you're not going to believe it, are you?
Oh, I believe it.
From the track each side, there was about 100 yards.
Yeah, and they just
absolute bare
disappeared.
ground.
Yeah.
Never saw him go. The tobacco was gone.
So he took the little bit of tobacco you had.
Yeah, but where did he go?
But yes, yeah.
Where did he come from? I've never been able to work it out. None of the boys reckon they saw him. He wasn't there as far as I were concerned.
But other people have said how they just appear in the bush and disappear in the bush. You don't hear them coming.
Oh, no.
You don't see them going.
That's correct, but this was open ground.
Open
It
ground.
wasn't even a piece of grass on.
What time of day was it?
Midday, roughly.
Oh, so it's not as if you'd had lots of shadows or anything.
No. And there was no shadows there. It was way out in the open.
So
anyway.
how was your health while you were up there?
Up and down, like a yo-yo. But I got dysentery at one stage in Moresby while we were on drone defence, and I was sent back to a hospital. It was only 2 or 3 miles back down the road. Now, the hospital was a big marquee, nothing else, on the side of a hill. It just put on the side of a hill, well, not levelled off or anything. And right on the road there was a tent fly. That's the part that goes over the top of the tent. And in there was a table with a book and a pencil. Now when I went in there, I had to put my name in the book, and I went into the marquee where all the other fellas were. There must have been 80 or 90 of them in there. Some of them had their pants down, some never had any pants on. They all had dysentery. Now, out the back of the...
So it was a marquee just for those with dysentery?
Yes, nothing else. Mm-hmm. No doctors, no nurses, no medical treatment, nothing. Mm. And out the back of it, if you went another 50 or 60 yards up the hill, the latrines were up there. Now, all along from the back of the marquee, right up to the latrines, there were fellas laying in the bush all over the place. No pants, and some of them didn't even have any clothes on. Mm. And there was one chappie laying across the doorway of the marquee, and I've never known to this day whether he was dead or not. I don't know. But every day or so, a utility would pull up at this little tent fly on the side of the road, and he'd leave 1 bucket of lime cordial there. That was the treatment we got. And I was there for about a week Never ever saw another person except the patients. No doctors or anything.
What did you do for food and fluids?
We never got any.
But you'd be losing fluids with your dysentery anyway.
Well, we got this one, what would it be? Milk bucket it was. You know what a milk bucket is?
Yes.
About 3 gallons, 2 gallons. We got one of those every 2 days. And that's all we got. That's the honest to God truth. So I got sick of this one day and I just picked up my gear and went back to my battalion. Just walked out of it. Nobody said anything. Later on, they built another hospital further up the ridge, right on top of it. They used to call that Lightning Ridge, because you had to be lightning to make the toilets. Down to Gona, and I got picked up a malaria, dengue fever, dermatitis, and dysentery. And Dr. Vernon, I think his name was Vernon. He evacuated me at 9 a.m. on the 17th of December. This is after Gona had fallen, and we'd been round at Hattie's village. And he evacuated me from there. I got back to Popondetta, and you were given a number when you got back to the aerodrome, and when there was room for you, you were put on the plane. The stretcher cases were first, naturally. So I just lay under a tent fly for a couple of days, and all I could think of was a drink of sarsaparilla. Now, why in the hell would you want to drink a sarsaparilla? And the creek was about 50 or 60 yards off. I'd crawl down to the creek, and fill up my water bottle, crawl back to the tent. By the time I got back there, the water bottle was empty. So anyway, this particular night we had a storm. It was a beauty. I woke up and I'm laying in about 6 inches of water. But all I had to do was turn my head to the right or left and I could drink all the water I wanted. 9 o'clock on the 17th of December I was evacuated, and I got into the hospital at 5 o'clock on the 24th of December.
Where was the hospital?
9 Mile in Moresby, second line to HEH.
Right, yeah.
I walked in there and I was looked after very well from there on.
So most of that time was spent waiting at Popondetta for a flight?
No, most of us spent walking.
So you walked from Popondetta across
I walked from Hattie's village, which is 20 or 30 mile the other side.
Yeah. In that state with your dysentery and your dengue fever. And
I had a temperature of 108.5 when I got to hospital.
And did that finish your time in New Guinea?
No, I was in hospital for a couple of weeks. Then I went up to Koitaki to convalescent camp, then back to the battalion. They were camped on the Laloki River, just near the hospital at the time, 2nd 9th AGH. That was just prior to when we came back to Australia for leave, 2.5. After the 39th was broken up, I went over to the 2nd Battalion with a lot of the boys, but why we were broken up remains a mystery. Heaven only knows. But anyway, they did in their wisdom. And we ended up with the 2nd Battalion, and we made a landing up at Itapi, just on the Dutch-New Guinea border, and Papua border. And we fought our way from there down to Wewak and then inland over the Prince Alexander Ranges for about 3 days walk in. And that's where we were when peace was declared, when VP was declared.
How were you told that it was declared? Did they?
Well, one of the SIGs came up to me. I was sitting on a hill. I had about 15, 20 chappies there. It was, I suppose you'd call it, company headquarters. And I had the mortars out. The mortars were down at a place called Ham Brewery. It was a group of villages called New Morecambe group of villages, but this particular village was called Ham Brewery. And one of the SIGs came up the hill this day and he said, "Hey Kev," he said, "the war's over." And that was about it. It took a while to sink in. But after that, we were there for about a fortnight, 3 weeks, and we were not allowed to attack the Japanese, but we were allowed to repel them. And each morning and each night we had stand to. And we were withdrawing our troops from the front line, and the Japs thought, oh, well, they've run out of chuff or something, run out of communication lines, and they start to attack us every day. This went on for about a fortnight after the war, and a good mate of mine too. I was standing there talking to him one night, I looked at my watch and I yelled out, stand to! Now we had been issued with Owen guns, and they're very, very touchy on the mechanism. And his Owen gun was sticking out under his two-man tent, about that far, and he just leant down and grabbed it by the barrel. And before I could say anything, he pulled it out to go on stand to, and the cocking piece caught on the edge of his bed. I suppose it cocked it about that much, and it fired, and the bullet went through that part of his hand and straight through, right through the nipple of his left nipple and into his heart. And he died about, I suppose, 2-3 minutes later, died in my arms, before the RAP or anything.
This is after the war.
This is about a fortnight, 14 days, 15 days after the war, yes.
What do you think is important to remember about the New Guinea campaigns for future generations?
Well, there's a lot of lessons there. I suppose the most important thing is that Australia nearly became part of Japan. It was very, very close, very touch and go that the Australians got into Australia, the Japanese, I should say, I beg your pardon, got into Australia. And it was only another matter of another 3 or 4 days, and they'd have had Moresby. But the word came through that we were not allowed to withdraw anymore, and that's what Colonel Honour said, so that's what we did. We stayed there. When I say we, I wasn't there. I say we, I mean the battalion.
You talked at the start of the interview that it was a really ragtag, poorly trained group of blokes.
Yeah.
How would you describe it at the end?
A fantastic battalion, one of the best that's ever been in Australia. And they'll never top the 39th Battalion.
Couldn't
Never.
agree more. So I think we'll finish on this note, and on behalf of the 39th Battalion History Association, thank you very, very much for your
Thank you.
time.